You walk out to your tool shed in the early spring, or perhaps you open a glossy magazine and you see these advertisements. Bright plastic bottles lined up on shelves, heavy motorized backpacks that look like something out of a science fiction story, and contracts from lawn care companies promising to blanket your entire property in synthetic chemicals for $500 a season. We have been taught to believe that safety costs a great deal of money, and that the only way to protect our families from the dangers hiding in the grass is to pay a professional to spray a mist of permethrin over every blade of lawn. We see the white trucks park at the curb. We watch a man don a rubber mask, and we hand over our hard-earned dollars because we are afraid for our children. Stop and think about that for a moment. Why do we automatically assume that the most expensive, complicated answer is the only one that works? How did the old-timers, the generations who cleared these woods and raised large families in the deep brush, manage to walk through the world without a monthly subscription to a chemical company? They used what they had. And they understood the nature of the enemy. The small creature waiting in the long grass at the edge of your yard right now does not care about your tidy lawn. It is no bigger than the head of a pin if it is a young one, no bigger than a sesame seed if it has grown. It does not move much. It just sits at the tip of a blade of grass with its little front legs out, and it waits. It waits for a warm body to walk past so it can grab on. Once it is on you, it climbs up the sock, up the calf, up to the back of the knee, or the inside of the thigh, or the soft place behind the ear where the skin is thin. There it bites, and there it stays drinking for days at a time, and what it leaves behind in your blood can change your life. That is a tick. And the children we used to send, running through the grass without a thought, we cannot send them anymore the way we used to. Lyme disease is now in every state in this country. The cases reported to the doctors have tripled in the last 15 years, and the real number is many times higher, because most cases never get reported. There is a new one I want you to know about called alpha-gal syndrome that the lone star tick carries, and one bite can leave a person allergic to all red meat and dairy for the rest of their life. Nearly 500,000 cases are suspected in this country already. That is not fear talking. That is the plain truth of what is in the grass. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My grandchildren run through this same farm and these same woods I ran through as a boy, and the ticks are worse now than they ever were in my lifetime. Today, I am going to share a different way. A way that costs less than you spend on lunch, requires no synthetic poisons, and relies on a piece of forgotten wisdom that modern science has finally caught up with. But let us be completely honest with each other before we go any further. I will not tell you that traditional methods are a magical shield that will wipe every single tick off the face of the earth. If anyone promises you 100% elimination in nature, they are selling you something. In a laboratory, the natural oil we are going to use kills and repels ticks at rates of 80 to 90%. Those are real, verified numbers. But in a real backyard, under the hot sun and the heavy rains, the numbers are more modest. Field studies done by disease researchers show that a single application might only knock down 25% of the active ticks and give you a couple of weeks of partial suppression. Understand this. A single tool is never enough. The secret lies in a 4-method approach, where each simple step covers the weakness of the other. When you combine them, you create a barrier that actually works where your family lives, walks, and plays. To understand why this traditional approach works, you have to understand the game. Ticks do not actually live in your short lawn. The neat, trimmed grass under the midday sun is too hot and too dry for them. They would dehydrate and die within hours. Instead, they live in the leaf litter, the loose, damp, decomposing leaves under bushes, along fence lines, and in the shaded edges where the woods meet the yard. The boundary between your yard and the wild is where they sit and wait. Mowing your lawn does almost nothing to solve the problem. You can mow it down to a green carpet, and they are still sitting 12 feet away under your forsythia bushes, ready to ride a passing dog or a child right into the middle of your property. The old farmers knew that to fight an enemy, you go to where he hides, and the weapon they reached for is one of the oldest materials known to woodworkers: cedar. You know the smell of real cedar. It is a warm, sharp, aromatic scent that fills an old blanket chest or a closet. You have likely seen a cedar fence post that has been stuck in the damp earth for 30 years without rotting. The reason cedar wood lasts where oak and pine rot away is the same reason it repels the creatures in the grass. The wood itself is saturated with natural compounds, complex oils that small insects simply cannot tolerate. When a tick crawls across the surface of cedar, these aromatic compounds disrupt its breathing through the tiny respiratory holes in the side of its body. It dries out from the inside. It turns back or it dies. This is not folklore. Modern agricultural experiment stations have tested this old knowledge and confirmed it. But you do not need to buy a pre-made $30 plastic jug from a big box store where 90% of what you pay for is water and marketing. I want to show you how we take the pure essence of that wood, a tiny bottle that costs just a few dollars, and turn it into a highly effective homemade perimeter defense that costs about $3 a batch to mix. It takes less than 3 minutes to prepare. It is completely safe for your children to walk through, and it targets the exact boundaries where the danger waits. But before I show you exactly how we mix this down-to-earth solution in the kitchen and how we apply it to the yard, there is a very specific safety rule regarding our animals, especially if you keep a cat, that you must understand, or you risk doing great harm to the creatures you intend to protect. Let us begin with that safety word about our animals, because if you do not understand the biology of the creatures on your farmstead, you can make a grave mistake with the best of intentions. Dogs handle cedar oil quite well, but cats are a different matter entirely. A cat's liver lacks a specific enzyme needed to break down the natural chemicals found in essential oils. If you spray cedar oil directly onto a cat, or soak the rug where it sleeps, that oil builds up in its system. You will notice the animal becoming sluggish, perhaps vomiting, and in bad cases, its nervous system will suffer. So hear me clearly. This homemade spray is for the perimeter of your yard and the fabric of your clothing. Never mist it over a cat, and do not use it inside a home where a cat lives. But I will tell you something the commercial lawn companies won't. Those expensive chemical sprays containing permethrin are far more toxic to felines than cedar will ever be. If a cat walks across a lawn freshly treated with commercial pesticide and licks its paws, it can suffer severe seizures within hours. Our traditional way requires respect and common sense, but it remains a far gentler choice for the land and the household than the white trucks and their chemical hoses. Now, let us walk into the kitchen and prepare the mixture. To make your $3 batch of perimeter spray, you need 3 simple things, and you must gather them with care. The first is a 4-ounce bottle of pure cedarwood essential oil. Look for the kind labeled as Western red cedar or Virginian cedar. When you open the small amber glass bottle, the scent should be thick and heavy, like the air inside an old wood shop where logs are being sawn. Sharp, rich, and slightly sweet. It should not smell like perfume or alcohol. This oil is thick and golden, almost the color of clear clover honey, and a single drop will stay on your fingertips for hours if you touch it. The second ingredient is distilled water. Do not use the water straight from your kitchen tap. Tap water contains dissolved lime, iron, and chlorine. Those minerals have a hard, invisible charge that prevents the oil from suspending properly in the liquid. Spend the 90 cents on a gallon of pure distilled water. It is completely clean, clear, and neutral. The third item is your bridge, what the old chemists called an emulsifier. As you know from dressing a salad, oil and water refuse to mix. If you pour cedar oil straight into water, it will simply float to the top in large, greasy amber bubbles. And when you pump your spray bottle, You will blast pure water first and pure oil at the very end. To bind them together, we use plain witch hazel from the drugstore, or a splash of clear, cheap vodka if you have it on hand. This liquid acts as a middleman, holding the microscopic droplets of cedar oil evenly throughout the water. Take a clean, standard 32-ounce plastic spray bottle. Measure out exactly 1 teaspoon of your pure cedarwood oil. Pour it directly into the bottom of the dry bottle. Watch how it clings to the plastic, slow and syrupy. Next, add 1 tablespoon of the witch hazel. Swirl the bottle gently in your hand. You will see the golden oil instantly dissolve into the clear alcohol, turning into a faint, cloudy milk. Once those two are married, pour in 1 pint. That is 2 cups of your distilled water. Fasten the spray nozzle tightly and shake the bottle vigorously for 10 seconds. The liquid inside should now look completely uniform, like a pale, watery milk, and the moment you open the nozzle, the room will fill with the clean, deep fragrance of a deep cedar forest. Here is the first mistake beginners make. They mix a giant batch in a 5-gallon bucket and leave it sitting in the sun on the back porch. Sunlight and heat are the enemies of natural oils. The ultraviolet rays break down the complex molecules of the cedar, rendering it useless within a few days. Mix only what you will use that afternoon. If you have a little left over, store the bottle in a cool, dark cupboard beneath the sink, away from the light. Now, take the bottle out to the yard. Remember our lesson from earlier. Do not waste your time or your spray on the short green grass in the center of your lawn where the sun beats down. Walk directly to the shaded edges, hold the nozzle about 12 inches from the ground, and adjust the tip until it throws a fine, heavy mist. Not a coarse stream that drips off the leaves, and not a fog that blows away in the wind. You want to hear a steady, rhythmic hiss, hiss, hiss as you work. Spray a band about 2 feet wide along the entire length of your property line, where the lawn meets the tall weeds or the woods. Drench the dark, damp spaces beneath your ornamental shrubs. Coat the bottom 2 feet of your wooden fence posts and the shaded soil behind the woodpile. These are the damp highways where the ticks sit on the tips of leaf litter, waiting for the humidity of the evening. When you are finished, the perimeter of your yard should look slightly damp, and the air should smell strongly of fresh-cut timber. You must reapply this mist every 2 weeks during the height of the spring and summer, and always right after a heavy downpour. A hard rain will wash the oil off the leaves and into the dirt, breaking your line of defense. It takes 10 minutes to walk the line and refresh the barrier, a small chore that connects you to the rhythm of your land. That is your immediate defense, the spray that stops them this week. But as a practical man, you know that spraying every fortnight is a temporary fix. You want something permanent, something you can install once and leave alone for 3 years, while it does the quiet, heavy lifting for you. Which brings us to our second line of defense, the physical wood barrier. This is the step that transforms a temporary treatment into a lasting farmstead solution. To do this right, you cannot use the cheap bags of shredded mulch from the garden center. That is often just ground-up scrap pine dyed red or black with chemicals, and it holds no power against insects. You need the real thing, and you need to know how to lay it so the geometry of the yard works in your favor. Now that we have walked the perimeter and mixed the spray, I want you to stop and think about what is actually happening down in the dirt. To rely on a method year after year, you must understand the reason it works. We are not using folklore or superstition. We are using nature's own defensive chemistry. Understand this. Trees cannot run away from their enemies. A cedar tree cannot pack up its roots and move to a different patch of soil when wood-boring beetles, fungi, or parasites begin to chew on its bark. Over thousands of years, the tree had to learn to stand its ground and fight. It did this by brewing its own internal armor, a complex mixture of organic compounds that flow through its wood like blood. When modern university researchers look at cedar oil under a microscope, they isolate specific molecules with names like thujone, cedrol, and plicatic acid. But you do not need a degree in chemistry to understand what these molecules do. To a tiny, soft-bodied creature like a tick, these compounds are a deadly, suffocating fog. Ticks do not have lungs like you and I. They do not breathe through a mouth. Instead, they have microscopic ports along the sides of their hardened bodies called spiracles. These are tiny tubes that draw oxygen directly into their tissues. The oil of the cedar tree has a very particular weight and surface tension. It is what scientists call volatile, meaning it slowly evaporates into the air, creating an invisible heavy vapor right at the surface of the wood or the leaf. When a tick walks into that vapor zone, the oily molecules physically block those microscopic breathing ports. It is like trying to breathe through a cloth soaked in grease. At the same time, the chemistry of the oil dissolves the thin, protective, waxy coating that covers the tick's outer shell. Without that wax layer, the moisture inside the tick's body rapidly evaporates into the air. The creature simply dries up and stops moving. That is the science of it, explained in plain terms. It is a mechanical and chemical trap created by the forest itself. But as I promised you from the very beginning, I am going to be completely honest with you about the boundaries of this method. Every tool has a limit, and if you do not know where your tools fail, you will eventually find yourself unprotected. First, let us speak about weather and water. The homemade cedar spray we just mixed is an outdoor topical treatment. It is not permanent, because it is a natural oil suspended in water. A heavy summer thunderstorm, the kind that dumps an inch of water on Lancaster County in 20 minutes, will physically wash those molecules off the leaves and into the deep soil where they can no longer reach the ticks. If you experience a week of steady rain, your barrier is gone. You must accept that this method requires your labor and attention. You cannot spray it once in May and assume you are safe until September. Second, consider the temperature and the wind. On a blistering afternoon in July, when the thermometer hits 95 degrees and a hot breeze is blowing across the fields, the cedar oil will vaporize much faster than it would on a cool, damp morning. The very property that makes it work, its volatility, means that extreme heat causes it to burn off quickly. In the dead of summer, the effectiveness of the spray drops from a few weeks down to perhaps 7 or 8 days. Third, you must understand the limitation of the surfaces you are spraying. If you coat a porous, unsealed wooden deck or an old, dry canvas tarp, the material will soak the oil deep into its fibers, hiding the chemistry away from the surface where the ticks actually walk. It works best on porous living foliage, stone borders, and the damp leaf litter where the oil can sit on the surface film of the moisture already present. Most importantly, understand the limit of the insect itself. Cedar oil is a contact repellent and a localized suffocant. It does not possess a systemic draw. It will not lure a tick out of the tall grass to its death like a piece of cheese in a mousetrap. If a tick is clinging to a blade of grass 3 feet above the zone you sprayed, or if a field mouse carries a dozen young ticks across your stone path in the middle of the night, the cedar oil cannot stop them. It only works where it is placed, and it only kills what it touches. This is exactly why the single spray bottle, on its own, is an incomplete strategy. If you rely solely on the liquid mixture, you will eventually miss a week, or a heavy rain will surprise you, and the barrier will fail. To truly secure your yard without spending a fortune on chemical contracts, you must combine this short-term liquid defense with a heavy, physical material that the weather cannot easily destroy. Let us step away from the kitchen counter and look out at the landscape itself. I want to show you the third method, the one that involves no mixing, no spraying, and works continuously through the seasons while you sleep. We are going to look at the 3-foot cedar chip barrier, how to source the material for next to nothing, and how to lay it so that the very geometry of your property turns the tide against the creatures waiting in the brush. The use of cedar as a guardian of the household is not a new invention, nor is it a secret that belonged only to my ancestors here in Pennsylvania. If you look back through the old records, you will find that humanity has known the power of this wood for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians used the oil of cedar to preserve what they valued most, knowing that neither rot nor the small boring insects of the desert could touch a surface coated in its essence. In the early days of this country, long before the first chemical laboratory was built, the native peoples of the eastern forests would burn cedar boughs to clear their encampments of pests, and they lined their bedding with the fragrant green needles to keep the biting insects at bay. When the first European settlers arrived with their axes, they quickly observed which trees stood the test of time. They noticed that while a post made of maple or birch would rot into the dirt within 5 seasons, a post split from a mature cedar tree would stand straight and true in the damp earth for 40 years, unchanged. My own grandfather taught me to use cedar shavings in the nesting boxes of our poultry and the bedding of our working horses. He did not know the words thujon or molecular disruption. He simply knew from a lifetime of observation that the small, blood-sucking mites that plague a flock could not breed where the scent of cedar was strong. He trusted the old knowledge because it had been tested by the only laboratory that truly matters. Generations of daily life on the land. In our modern era, we do not have to rely only on the word of our grandfathers. Modern science has taken these traditional practices and placed them under the cold light of rigorous testing. If you look at the research bulletins published by the United States Department of Agriculture, or the field studies conducted by the agricultural experiment stations in states like Connecticut and Rhode Island, where Lyme disease has taken its heaviest toll, you will find the proof in black and white. The research did not just test cedar oil, a glass dish. They went out into the real woods and the residential borders. Their published data shows that when a barrier of genuine cedar wood chips is laid down between a lawn and a forest edge, the number of black-legged ticks crossing into the managed yard drops significantly. The studies demonstrate that the physical and chemical barrier of the wood chips acts as a deterrent that forces the ticks to turn back, or dries them out before they can reach the grass where children play. The science confirms what the old-timers knew by instinct. Nature provides its own checks and balances if we are patient enough to learn them. Now, stop and think about the whole picture we have drawn today. We started our journey looking at the bright plastic bottles and the heavy backpack sprayers of the commercial pesticide companies. Solutions that cost hundreds of dollars every single year, require rubber masks to apply, and bring real danger to the cats that share our homesteads. We were told that this was the only way to keep our families safe from the changing reality of the grass. But look at what we actually have when we turn back to the older path. We have a simple fourfold plan that puts the governance of your property back into your own hands. You have the knowledge of where the enemy truly hides, not in your tidy lawn, but in the shaded leaf litter of the edges. You have a homemade cedar spray that costs $3 a batch to mix in an ordinary kitchen bottle, using pure oil and clean water bound together by a splash of witch hazel. You have the long-term protection of a 3-foot band of real cedar chips that works quietly for 3 seasons without your attention. And you have a 3-cent strip of common duct tape, wrapped sticky side out around the top of a child's sock, a mechanical barrier that stops a climbing tick in its tracks without a single drop of chemistry touching their skin. This is a plan you can implement this very week. It does not require a contract. It does not require a large sum of money, and it does not ask you to compromise the safety of your pets or the purity of your soil. It requires only a small amount of your time, a little ordinary labor, and a willingness to trust solutions that have been proven true over centuries of practice. I invite you to try this for yourself. Go to the local supplier, find the pure oil, lay out the chips along your fence line, and put the tape on your boots before you walk into the high meadow. Take back the edges of your yard. Let your children run through the green grass again with a light heart, knowing that you have built a wall of protection around them, using the oldest, simplest tools available to us. The ancient remedies are still here, waiting for us to remember them. They cost very little, they respect the land, and they work. Until we speak again next time about the traditional ways to keep the mice from your granary, mind the boundaries, lay the chips with a steady hand. And remember that the quietest defense is almost always the one that stands the longest.